Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we're going to get started then. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to call the February 22nd, 2024 Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Board meeting to order. It's 1:03. And let's start with roll call.
Nancy Hendrickson. Here. Steve Fancher.
Here.
Eric Mueller.
Here.
Dave Ritma.
Here.
Seth Reeser.
Here.
Ashton Simpson would be joining online, but I don't see him yet. Lori Stegman indicated she would be late. Emerald Bogue indicated she would not be able to attend. Corky Collier.
Here.
Michelle Altman. Let's see Michelle yet.
There she is.
Mary Helen Kincaid. Candy Stephenson.
Here.
Eric Molander.
Here.
Brent Cartwright.
Here.
Ed Washington. Bob Salinger. Thought I saw you connecting to audio.
Here.
Heather King is ill, and then Rochelle Altman. Here. Great, we have 11 board members present currently, and expecting a few more.
Okay, well, we have a quorum.
Let the people know online that we're having some Wi-Fi problems, and if they're booted off, to come back on, or to let us know if they can't hear us.
Hope everyone heard that online. We are having some connectivity issues. If we have a motion from staff to approve the minutes for meetings as stated, we have a.
I'll second that.
The second from Nancy. Any discussion on the motion?
It's updated. Yeah.
Clarification, Eric. That's consistent with your motion set. Yes. Let's just do a voice vote here in the room. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Passed unanimously.
Okay.
Sorry.
Like being in the great and terrible.
So we are gonna make sure we have everyone online before we proceed with the second business item, which is a bond update. And I turn it over to Jim.
We are back, Steve.
Excellent. Welcome back.
Everybody, we are making good progress. I'm going to mostly turn it over to Carrie. Not a ton has changed since your last conversation. We are awaiting this afternoon at 5 p.m. as the deadline to challenge our ballot title. There is some folks who are doing some work outside of official capacities that are getting started on that. And most of today's meeting now is related to helping educate voters about what's their vision is around that bond. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie to walk through just a quick update and let you know where we're at. So far, so good.
Yeah, Lori, we do need you to share those slides.
Yeah, so when we get the slides pulled up, we'll just say, following the vote on the 7th and the referral of the measure, this is intended to be an overview of what's next. So now through the election time period, the activities of staff, role of the board, some reminders on the political restrictions on public employees. And so we'll have an opportunity to discuss a number of those things. And then at the end, we also have a vote for a staff recommended task order for a bond education program that exceeds the $100,000 cap, and so therefore requires board approval. But the presentation will provide some context for that as well. So we thought we would sequence it just after the presentation.
Are we doing on slides?
No, Lori, are you able to?
Yeah, let me share my screen. Sorry about the delay there.
Thank you. All right. We can go to the next slide. So I'm going to go over a timeline of now through the election. We'll have a chance to revisit restrictions on political activity and the board role in this time, the resources that are or will be available for you all during this period, and then a chance for discussion. Allison Keene, our outside counsel, is here, so if there are questions that have come up between last meeting and now about political restrictions, board role, et cetera, she's available to discuss those, and then we'll have the opportunity for the board if they wish to vote on the task order. Okay, next slide. So here's our timeline. The things in the yellow boxes are things that you can expect that you'll hear specifically about from staff, though of course you'll have updates from us if anything arises all along the way. After the vote on the 7th, the following Monday, the initial filing was made with the county and they published the ballot title on their website. As Jim mentioned, it's been through almost all of the challenge period, and so today at 5 p.m. is the end of that. And after that would be the earliest we could do the final filings with the county that, formally put that title summary question on the ballot, as well as the explanatory statement that goes in the voter pamphlet and provides a little bit more information for voters.
It's also when we'll get an actual ballot title number.
Yeah, we'll have a measure number assigned after, and it's really pretty quick, should be kind of the same day. So again, provided that the challenge period, that there are no challenges, that could be as soon as tomorrow that we get a measure number assigned, or Monday. So we'll let you all know. And then the rest of the pieces on here are primarily about education. So we're in the process right now of having the Secretary of State approve a draft website. The vast majority of the language for the website has already been through Secretary of State review, and that's what's in your packet as a description. And so we feel very confident that that is, by their definition, impartial, factual, educational information that you can kind of pull from if you want to describe the measure in your official role as a board member of the new district. But we had a few changes in the way the Secretary of State's review works. It needs to look exactly like what they approved. So we're getting some final approval on that website, and you will be notified when that goes up. Because again, that's a great resource in your board role of something that you can send to people confidently and know that it meets all the restrictions on political activity. And then, and we do have introduce Jake Weigler in a minute here. The next phase of the education program is around mailers and digital ads that will go to that Secretary of State approved website. And so we'll be developing and moving through that formal review, those mail pieces that are intended to go to residents of the district to inform them about the measure. And so Jake Weigler is on the line. He is from Praxis Political. They are one of our communications consultants and have been advising us both on Secretary of State approval as well as this education program. So yeah, okay, we can't see you on the big screen. Emily, can we pull up faces?
Yeah, are we going to slides?
We'll go back to slides. I can, okay. I think we're good in the room, Jake. Got it. There we go. Go ahead.
There we go. Hi, everybody. So appreciate being back in front of you again today. As you may know, flood safety is not top of mind for the typical resident of the district. So what we'll be doing over the next couple months is doing a number of communications programs to help inform and educate the public about the need for flood safety along the Columbia River and the features of this program. This is very consistent with how other localities in the area do this, whether it's Metro or City of Portland. And so as Carrie mentioned, there are kind of two components. One would be mail pieces that would go to likely voters across the district. And then the other would be digital online ads which would also be targeted to likely voters across the district and will take people to the website that Carrie mentioned, which will provide factual, neutral information that's been approved by Secretary of State's safe harbor process to make sure that it complies with state laws. And I think that's the highlights. I'm happy to answer any questions if people have them.
Jake? Yeah, we can pause there if there's any questions about the education program at this stage. Of course, it'll come back up after.
So when you say that the mailer is going to the district, you mean the entire urban growth boundary, correct? Or just to the managed floodplain?
Across all of the public that is part of the new district will be included. So yeah, within the urban growth boundary, Multnomah County.
And just a curiosity thing, the digital ads, are those just going to be served up when somebody goes to Oregon Live or something like that? Or how do you reach people?
Yeah, so for folks less familiar, there's kind of two ways you can buy digital advertising. One is on a specific property or site like Oregon Live or KTU.com or Better Homes and Gardens. You can buy specific to a publication or an outlet, or you can buy based on audience. And because we know at the end of the day, we're talking to the voters within this geography, we're not talking to Washington County or Clackamas County. We actually are able to identify the voters in the district and then serve those ads up to specifically to them. And those will appear across platforms. So it could appear on Oregon Live, could appear on Better Homes and Gardens, as people are navigating around the web, as you may encounter in your daily life when you say something in your phone about I need to buy new tires. And suddenly wherever you go on the internet, you see those ads for tires around you. This is the same philosophy now of, okay, we know the voters in this district, so we will serve this content up to them as they're navigating and surfing the web.
I just didn't know if you wanted to.
Oh, Mary Helen, hands up.
Yeah, I understand that part of it, but where, I got asked the question today because someone went to the website and said the ballot title or whatever, but they were unable to see the ballot title that had been submitted. And they have till 5 p.m. today with Multnomah County. Where would they see the information if they had or the desire to make a challenge? And I don't know who answers that, but it sounds like I think going to Oregon Live, I just tried it on my phone and I didn't find anything. But I am not as technically adept as you are or a 13-year-old is. So
I'm happy to take that question, or Jim, if you prefer.
Go ahead, Jake. Thank you.
So that information is currently on the Multnomah County election site.
okay.
I will say it's a little buried. I was looking for something else there the other day about ballot measures, and you had to kind of click 2 levels down, but it's under the current elections tab, and that's where to promulgate that.
And a copy of the ballot title is also linked on the MCDD website homepage. It's not the same as the county elections, but it says that the ballot title is available, and that's on the slider, right? It's recommended that the organization putting forth the ballot title also make that publicly available. So we did post it on our homepage.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you, Jake. So if we could pull back up I just want to highlight one more thing on our timeline, which is going to be a few slides back. If we could go back to the timeline slide, please. There you go. So just to note that the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission will have a hearing on this ballot measure. That's standard. I think many of you have been through the TSCC hearings with the budget for this organization. So in advance of that, you'll certainly hear from us. It's going to, we believe, be on May 5th. So aligned with, or sorry, 1st, which is the work session date. So it'll be integrated with the board meeting. That's something, again, things in the yellow boxes that you'll hear from us about in advance. And then the election is on May 21st. So that's your preview of the next 3 months, almost to the day. 3 months from today, we might know something. depending on the publication of election results. Go ahead. Oh,
So
Yes.
bonehead question about the May TSCC hearing. What could happen at that hearing? You know, the election is like 2 weeks later.
yeah, they intentionally, and Lori, I don't know, you may be able to speak to this as well, having more experience with TSCC. They do intentionally align it with when folks are going to have their ballot measures, have their ballots and voter pamphlets so that people are paying attention. And they're going to provide us questions in advance that, we're able to share at the meeting. And I guess I think of it primarily as an opportunity for the public to see an inquiry about some of the financials of the measure.
Okay, so it's not anything like, oh, we looked at this and now you have to change it, because it's like,
It's
change anything. It's more like,
too late to change
we
it.
have questions and answers that the public can tune into.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So it's an opportunity for public comment, as well as the TSCC commissioners will submit questions that they have about the bond.
All right. Okay, well, we can go to the next slide then. And so at this point, I know it's a bit of a group effort today, but Allison Keene is also on the line here today. So last time she gave an overview of the restrictions of political activity for public employees. And we wanted to emphasize that in your role as new district board members, you're all appointed, and therefore those restrictions do apply. And when you're acting in your role as a new district board member, that you can speak impartially and factually about the measure. Allison, do you want to, and the rest of these are reminders about some of the information that is in the memo that you received last time and this time. Allison, do we have you on the line here? Are you able to?
Yes, certainly. Can you see me? It looks like it's not showing.
We can't see you, but we can hear you. So, oh, there we go.
Oh,
There I am.
There we go. Okay, well, yeah, if you wanted to offer any reminders, and certainly if folks have questions, this is a good opportunity. I know you heard it from the first time right after, or for some people it was the first time right after the referral vote. And we want to make sure that we're providing you the information that you need during this campaign time period.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm not going to go through all the slides that I went through last time unless there's a general consensus that wants me to. And you all should have received my memo, which outlines the restrictions on political activity. And that also cites with a hyperlink to the Secretary of State's manual discussing it more in depth. I've spoken to a few of you who had some specific questions, and I'm happy to continue to do that either by cell phone or email. I'm going to be in Canada for the next week, so probably email is better. But I'm willing and able to talk with you now. If anyone has any questions, I've found on these sort of things that questions from one person usually are helpful for others because there's not that many issues that come up, but the ones that do tend to come up for lots of folks. But just in general, as Carrie said, non-elected public officials, public employees, which means those who are paid or volunteer, such as appointed board members, are subject to the same restrictions on political activity that exist in the Oregon statutes, namely that we cannot promote or oppose a pending measure or candidate. And that is a much broader definition than one might think. It doesn't only mean vote yes on, reso or referral number blank, or vote for or vote against. The courts and the Attorney General view this law much more broadly. So we as public officials, either as appointed or volunteer or salaried or hourly, all have the same rules. We have to be very neutral. We can only provide factual information regarding any pending measure or candidate. It usually comes up when we are in a public body that has just referred a measure, because The day before referral, we can talk freely about the need for it. And in fact, the need for it is usually what causes the governing body to refer a measure. But once it's referred, it's now a political matter. And so that's when the rules changed, because we can't give personal opinions about political matters when we're acting in our official function. We don't lose our right to free speech and right to political activity by becoming working for a government entity, but it's restricted in that we have to make sure that if we are advocating or opposing or working on a political matter while it's pending, that we do so only in our personal capacities. So if you want to work on any political campaign, you have to do so in your individual capacity, not as an appointed board member. For those of you who also hold elected positions, these rules do not apply similarly to elected officials, but none of you are elected officials for the board. You're all appointed. So if you're an elected official, it seems kind of formalistic, but it's the law. If you're an elected official, you can wear your elected official hat. Say I'm an elected official from the city of Troutdale. I can say, in my capacity, I'm speaking right now as an elected official for the city of Troutdale, and I think you should vote yes on blank. Here's all the reasons. That's your pretend hat that you're wearing, and that's legal. But if you are there as an appointed official, if you're representing the district, all you can do and all your staff can do is speak factually about it. If you're there as a citizen, you're in the audience, you are speaking, you're not there representing the district, you can exercise your right to speak politically, but make sure that you don't, make sure that you're clear about what hat you're wearing. Right now, I'm speaking as a public citizen, and I'm very concerned about the risks of flooding. I think this bond measure is a really great way that we can protect those important industrial and private lands, including the airport and a lot of industrial properties. And I'm saying this not in my role as an attorney for the district, but I'm saying this as in my personal capacity. That's how I would do it. But if someone said, well, what's the measure about, Allison? Then I would have to be speaking as a representative of the district in my official capacity, because a citizen doesn't know what's it about. And I would have to then say, okay, now you've asked me that question. I'm going to answer you as in my capacity as the attorney for the district. So I'm going to have to, I can't advocate anything. I'll tell you the facts. It's a $150 million bond measure. It is for, and then I would read from the Secretary of State's approved language to tell folks what it's for, so that it's not advocating. And if they said, well, why do you think you should vote? How do you think you should vote on this, Allison? I'd say, well, as a representative in my official capacity, I'm not able to provide my personal opinion. If I take off my hat for a minute and I'm also a voter, and now I'm just letting you all know I'm not speaking as a representative here. I'm speaking in my personal capacity. I think it's a worthwhile thing to vote for, or I don't think it is, or whatever. You know, you can say yes or no, but you have to be really clear about the capacity in which you're speaking. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes.
Nancy?
So, so I am a public employee in my day job, working for the city of Portland, and I am appointed by the city of Portland to represent the city on this board. When I give briefings to elected officials for the city of Portland, I think I got the first part. So it doesn't matter who referred the measure, it's still a political thing, and so that matters. I think that's true. But so in my official capacity as a city of Portland employee briefing an elected official, am I bound by, I'm not allowed to say support
That's right. You
Okay.
cannot. They
Okay.
can, after getting briefed by the facts by you. So your role as a City of Portland employee and an appointed board member here are the same under the rules against political activity, because in both capacities, you're unelected. So that means you cannot advocate. You can brief your elected official, and if they say, well, how should I vote? You say, I can't, I mean, this is what the law says. You'd have to say, well, personally, I'm going to vote on this, but I can't say how you should vote, politically. And elected officials are not allowed to ask their staff to write up talking points that are persuasive, do any sort of political activity for them, even though they can legally be political and advocate for something. They can't ask you to help them with that. So when you're briefing them, you give them the facts.
Okay, so even though I'm a city employee, briefing a city official, so none of us are like sort of in our personal public roles, that's when the law still applies. In terms of,
That's exactly when the law applies. That's exactly when the law applies. When you're acting in your official position. The only time for any of us who are non-elected, the only time we can advocate is in our personal public citizen capacity.
Okay.
Now, someone could say to you, well, you're on the board. How did you vote? Well, I voted yes. Why did you vote that way? That's kind of a gray area, because it kind of asks you to give your opinion and, to say, well, last week I voted yes because blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't cross that if there's any chance of a gotcha moment, like, especially if you're being interviewed or taped or, we all know that can happen. You want to be real careful if you're talking to a news publication or anything, but you also want to make clear the only time you can advocate now on anything is as a citizen.
Allison, this is Jim. Maybe a quick let me ask you, this be a way to respond in that setting. I voted yes to refer the measure so voters could decide, and I can't tell you how to vote, right?
Right. Yep. And I can tell you that the vote was, 27 yay and 3 abstaining. I can't remember what the vote was, but you can also say that. And here's the information on it. And then you can hand out some fact sheets that we will be creating for you as soon as the Secretary of State approves the things we've submitted to them.
Mary Helen, go ahead.
I might be thick as a brick here because I kind of cross both lines. I am a private citizen, not a city employee. I was elected. Now, elected is what I get stuck on, by Penn 2 landowners to represent them. And I was elected by my fellow Penn 2 supervisors to represent Penn 2 on the interim board.
Elected.
The use of word elected is, nobody went and voted
Elected
for me on a
means-
ballot.
So you weren't appointed to any of these roles?
But when you say appointed by who? I mean, I was appointed, but I was, sorry.
Appointed by the board.
Penn 2 appointed her, but Penn 2's board voted to appoint her, I think is the
That's
area
not
of gray.
I see. Elected means elected by the citizenry.
Okay. And so then, even more complicated, Penn 2 has not had a forum for their landowner meetings. So I just continue over by rules of the district. So technically, I was appointed to the position, but I've never been elected because we've never been able to get a quorum at our annual landowner meetings.
Yeah, in that case, I mean, then the rules are pretty clear for you. You're appointed. So that means you can't advocate while you're acting in that official position.
So I can't advocate, but if there's information.
You can provide factual information.
And that factual information is what MCDD staff will provide. Is that correct?
Correct, correct. They are
Okay.
currently getting the wording approved by the Secretary of State, and that will make sure that what you say is completely legal and kosher and non-advocacy.
Okay, and just one more question is I exchanged emails with Jim because several neighbors are very attentive to watching our interim board meetings and Pen 2 meetings. And they saw where I was one of the 3 that abstained from referring this to the bond and wanted to know why. And I said, I don't know whether I can answer you and I'll find out. So why I mean, and I don't know if I say that here in this public meeting, is that okay? Because no,
No,
it's not.
no, you abstained, that's the fact. If you were to start to talk about why you would be opposing the measure. So you would be,
Yeah, I didn't oppose the measure. I just
No.
opposed me having to vote.
yes, but if you explain why you didn't vote yes, it would be advocacy for a no position. So say I
What would you say?
abstained.
Then what would you say if someone asked you the question that I got asked?
I would say I abstained, and I'm not allowed to explain my feelings politically about this measure. I can tell you as a private citizen, I'm going to vote yay or vote nay.
Okay,
And here's why. But the vote was, however many in favor and 3 abstentions, and I was one of them.
okay. Because I also got asked that question from a public official, why did you abstain? And I said, I can't answer, but I, as a personal citizen, feel this way. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, Eric?
Allison, can the Pen 2 board pass a resolution saying that we're in favor of this measure?
Is the Pen 2 board elected?
Yes.
Then yes.
you.
Because you can express a a persuasive or political opinion as elected officials. You cannot ask your staff to write it up for you. I mean, they can type it, they can do administrative stuff. Like if you were to give them a draft, they can type it up, but they can't, unlike most of the things that staff do for resolutions, et cetera, they create the content sometimes and then you fix it or, change it. They can't do that in these cases.
Nelson, we can put it on the agenda and publish the agenda and support the meeting and all the other
Yes.
administrative functions. We just can't actively engage in the creation of content that would advocate.
Yes, thank you, Jim. That's right.
Other questions? Bob?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this conversation too far, but I'm a little surprised that we're not allowed to explain a vote. I think because to me that's different than advocating or opposing the measure. I'm a little surprised that we can't say, yes, I abstained, and the reasons I abstained I put on the record, and they were as follows.
Well, see, that's different. When you put it on the record, when you're just stating a fact, it's almost like you're not stating it for the truth of the matter, for those lawyers in the room. You are saying, here's a transcript of what I said. I wouldn't embellish on it. If you did make a statement for the record, you can say what you said. Here's what the record shows. And so what you said then, you can tell them what you said then, but you can't start extrapolating and saying, well, here's why I think that. Oh, no, that's not what I think about. If you're acting in your official capacity.
Well, fortunately, I'm so verbose that I put pretty much anything and everything on the record. So,
Right.
I'm safe there.
Right.
And Allison, I do want to emphasize, I think you have opined a couple of times that if you wanted to go into your reasons one way or another or your feelings on a measure, you would just have to declare, I am no longer in my board role. I am now in a resident or a citizen role. And as a citizen, I'm thinking this. So Bob, you're not prohibited. What you're prohibited from doing is associating your personal opinion of advocacy one way or another with your official position. That's the line.
Wendy?
I'm sorry, Allison, I have a follow-up to Eric Molender's question, because some of the Penn 2 board members have been appointed and some have been elected.
To their own board?
Yeah. Appointed due to a vacancy.
I don't know. We're gonna have to ask the Secretary of State on that one. I think they would be treated as an elected official because that's how the election process goes.
Thank you.
Another reason for caution, and be clear if you're advocating that you're not in your official capacity, right?
Unless you're elected.
Yeah.
And you're doing it as that elect. You can't say, well, I'm elected at this city X, so as an appointed member of the board, I'll say this. You have to make clear you're saying, so for my city, here's why I think it's great for our city.
And correct me,
But not- Yeah.
Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, but for those of us that have, 8 to 5 jobs in an official administrative capacity for one of the cities or other organizations, it's safest probably not to try to switch hats during that 8 to 5 window, but to maybe do your personal advocacy outside of that work window, because it couldn't be argued that even if you say, oh, I'm not representing my city right now, but you're on the clock, you're still representing your city.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm talking about, I'm trying to clarify what you can say in one role and another
Yeah.
role. As I have also advised, if you're going to do political work, advocacy work or anything, make sure that you make it clear in your files, if you are a salaried employee, that you are off the clock now. And I don't recommend just saying, oh, I'm on the clock, I'm off the clock, I'm on the clock,
Yeah.
so that your conversations fit it. I have recommended, as the Secretary of State has, that you make it clear in your timesheets and your calendar when you are off the clock. And so thank you for that point. For those who actually clock in and clock out or hourly, then it's more clear when they're acting in their official capacity. And they should do so only like on a lunch break or a real break. If you have real breaks that your union has required, to make sure that if you're doing that, any sort of political activity, you make it clear that you're not sitting at your desk doing it, you're away when you're on break. And that you don't use the city's computers and their materials for your own personal political advocacy work.
Mary Helen, do you have another question, or is your hand still up?
No, I could just to elaborate on that. I don't work. I'm retired. So if someone that doesn't know what I do, or other than work in my garden in my front yard, and they're walking by and say, do you know anything about the ballot measure? Do I have to qualify and say I'm on the board, or can I just say my opinion is, or my opinion is a private? I mean, if they don't know, it's
if they're
different.
asking you because they know you're on the board, if I were you, I'd want to make it clear. Like, well, I'm on the board, but I'm not speaking in that capacity. I'm just saying as a private citizen. And you can do that as much or as little as you want. The law says you do it. And then, what lawyers will often say is, well, who's the plaintiff? Is that person going to report you? Who knows? If there's any chance, I would recommend that you make it clear that you're talking in your personal capacity.
Okay.
Individual.
Yeah, it's like, who's gonna know? I mean, I hate to be that blunt about it, but it's
that's why we're really careful when we're.
Yeah, I'm one of the few interim board members who are not an employee of a government agency or representative of a government.
Yeah, but really that doesn't matter. If they were a representative of a government agency, they'd have the same restrictions.
Any other questions?
Yes, I would just ask you, if you have any concerns or you're unclear, you feel free to reach out to Allison or me and we can help you. Or if you're uncomfortable in a situation, that's why we're here. And we have the extra training and resources to make sure we handle any questions correctly. We've already had a few inquiries coming into the office from lawyers who we couldn't identify. And turns out one was working for League of Women Voters and is preparing a summary for them. So again, we treat every one of those as if we need to be very cautious and not advocate. So we're happy to have your back. And you do have some draft materials in your packet. that have preliminary approval. They are not approved because they're not all in their final state, but we should have those relatively soon. You will get them as soon as we have them, and you can rely on those. And if you use those words, you know you're safe, right?
Jim?
Allison, I have just a couple more slides and then we can close this out.
Sorry, we didn't even let you finish your presentation.
Oh, no, I mean, hopefully that was okay. I knew we would have a few different folks and it would be better to take questions at the time on those different topics. Yeah, this was my disjointed plan. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Lori.
It's me now.
Oh, it's you now? Okay, thank you, Wendy. So resources, the language that you have in your packet is really 99% there. It's going to be a really good resource. We're going to put that into a formatted handout so that if you wanted to have something you could leave with people, take away, again, when you're in your official capacity, you would have language that you were really confident about was considered impartial and educational. You have the memo to reference as well as staff as resources for questions on that. The measure website, we will email that out to you so that you have that link as soon as it's available. That should be, under 2 weeks, about 2 weeks. And then the mailers, the mail pieces that Jake mentioned and that are part of the task order, those are also things that will have extra copies at the office. You'll see them before they go out. So you'll know what other people are going to be seeing before they do. And I think that's my last slide, minus a discussion, which we've done a lot of. And so that we could probably move to the vote. So we mentioned this in the timeline portion, but there's a task order. There was a memo in your packet that is for Kearns and West, who has been our communications consultant throughout this GeoBond development process, and Praxis Political as their subcontractor to print and send those 3 mailers to likely voters within the entire district, as well as to publish those ads that link directly to the educational information by the Secretary of State approved website. So staff is seeking your approval, and there should be a draft motion in the memo.
There is a draft motion in the first paragraph of the memo on page 41 of the board packet. Thank you, Carrie. And at this point, just answer are there any questions for staff before we entertain a motion? Eric.
So a couple of things. Was this a separate RFP? You keep talking about it as a task order.
So the approved contract was for Kearns and West, and that was approved quite a while ago. And because this particular
go out to other potential contractors.
This was part of the original RFP to incorporate this, and
So you did go out to other
For the
potential
communications, for the overarching one we did.
we did a competitive procurement to get those guys originally. It's just now been a little while since we did that. So because this particular task order is above the approval threshold for me, we needed to bring it to the board.
Got it. And then just a curiosity issue. About how much per piece is that going to cost?
There's 2 smaller pieces and 1 larger piece. Jake, are you still on the line? I think the total task order is 189,000.
I am.
So there's.
Give me a minute to find that. I'll be right back.
So just send an email on to Jim, and Jim will give it to me. It quite honestly is just a curiosity on my part about how much these things cost today.
Happy to do it. And I think we're doing some bulk mail and other things to reduce delivery charges. And so, yeah, we'll happy to share that.
Other questions? Discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion. If you're.
Chair, I would move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to sign the task order with Kearns and West to implement a bond education program for $189,635, as so stated on page 41.
Thank you, Eric. We have a motion from Eric. We have a second from Ashton. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. Should we do a roll call? Or I guess let's just do a voice vote.
I think voice is fine.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on now to the legislative update. Thank you, Carrie. From Colin.
Hi, Colin Rowan here, giving you a quick legislative update. So Senate Bill 1517 is the bill in the 2024 legislative session that allows for the continued use of assessments by the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District that the legacy drainage districts currently use. It also creates the flood safety benefit fee, and it clarifies the dissolution process, indemnifies legacy board members, and makes some small changes to allow all of this to take place. And just wanted to give you a quick update. So last week, the bill was successfully passed out of the Senate Veterans Emergency Management Federal and World Affairs Committee. From there, it went to the Senate floor, and that vote happened just yesterday. And so that was approved by the Senate. And so want to definitely share some gratitude at that Senate hearing with the committee. We had Senator Gorsuch, Senator Dembro, and Senator Frederick all provide testimony, as well as Jim and Quirky. So thank you very much. The committee was very engaged and asked good questions. Our partners and other stakeholders provided some great written testimony as well. On the Senate floor, those three senators representing the legacy, the drainage district area, also provided testimony on the floor. So a lot of thanks to all of them, as well as all the support that we've received by you and your organizations. The next step is now goes over to the House. As soon as it gets assigned to a committee, we'll be looking for that to have a hearing. It needs to go through the same process. We think that it's likely going to go to the House counterpart to the Senate, which is the House Emergency Management, General Government, and Veterans Committee, but it could go other places. We'll find out very soon. And then once that measure is posted, has a hearing, then it moves on to a similar process of going to, if it makes it to the House floor, having a vote, and then going back to the Senate to basically be enrolled and hopefully sent to the governor's desk. So this is a very fast, the short session is ridiculously fast. And so we're already past the halfway mark, but making good progress. So yeah, please let me know if you have any questions.
I do want to emphasize the fact that we really appreciate the support from the cities and the county and Metro and the port who have helped us communicate the importance of the measure to the legislators. So thank you to all those folks who have contributed. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you for testifying.
Go ahead, Mary Helen.
Just, Colin, what's the deadline? I mean, when does the session end? I know they can vote to have emergency extension, but
yeah,
I guess
set to end on the 13th of March, I believe is the date. Might be 12th, but it's that, yeah. So it's coming up, but this is, we're actually keeping ahead of pace. So, but it's, there's a lot of bills that don't make it during a short session. So it's definitely something that we need to keep the pressure on. And yeah, it's a very short session, March 13th.
About 3
are there
weeks.
any representatives that we can encourage to speed it? I mean, like Lou Frederick and Mike Dembro, are there House representatives?
Yeah, so we have engaged. That's a great question. And so the House legislators for the managed floodplain are Representatives Hudson, Representative Tran, and Representative Nelson. They have all been briefed. They actually helped send a joint letter to House and Senate leadership. So they have been briefed. They're really engaged. They're talking to their fellow representatives. So there's a lot of work being done, but thanks for noting that, Mary Helen, that it is that delegation representing this managed floodplain area will be engaging in a similar way with whatever committee it gets assigned to.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Eric, I noticed that the costs for the mail pieces are in the chat, but we'll capture them and email them to you.
Any other questions for Colin on this item? Not seeing any, so do we want to move on to your next item, Colin, the planning for new responsibilities?
Sure, thanks. So we have coming up your budget conversations, so that will be taking up some of your upcoming meetings. And funding for the new purposes of ORS 550, the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District, is a really important thing, both for the continued progress of the new district, but also because there's statutory requirements associated with it. And so that was incorporated into the 5-year forecast that your board had considered and recommended moving forward with. And part of that included funding for environmental and climate resilience work, cultural history, and equity work. And so in your proposed forecast, you had $500,000 allocated between the environmental, climate change, and cultural history components, and then the equity funding, because in the statute says it needs to be incorporated into all the operations, is something that is being addressed through your adopted equity policy, as well as an equity action plan that will make sure that it gets embedded into all of the work. But focusing on that $500,000, the new responsibilities, really focusing in on the environmental, climate change, and cultural history. Just wanted to walk through where our staff is thinking about this, and then look to you as the initial board to provide some thoughts and insights that will be carried forward to the elected, the regular board, the elected and appointed board. So the next steps, given if the legislation is successful during the short session, is that beginning on July 1st, the urban district would be operationalized. And so the legacy districts would be dissolved, will be set up to have elections in November of the elected and appointed board that would be seated in January. And so the plan is for during the fall of this coming fall, 2024, for staff, the initial board, as well as stakeholders that have been engaging on this, to come up with a set of recommendations that can be moved forward for this regular board to consider how to implement. So the regular board, that elected and appointed board, is going to be responsible for setting program objectives and also for the financial policies, especially for anything around unspent carryover funds. But we did want to spend some time with you all, and we can continue having this conversation through the fall, but to solicit any of your best thinking, initial ideas of how do you suggest prioritizing spending that funding, and what would your objectives be to meet the statutory expectations. And I did, in the memo that's in the board packet, I did put the actual language that's out of ORS 550 around those objectives, but just wanted to open it up, have a conversation, start collecting and recording what some of your objectives for that spending is, to help identify program opportunities.
I'll start. I've been thinking about this a little bit, and not so much the prioritization between those elements that you talked about, but just a high priority in general on the climate change, climate resilience piece. There are certain investments that can be made that have long-term payback. And just, for example, our wastewater treatment plant, where we've invested significantly for renewable energy through capture of biogas, or we have a large solar array as well. I would like to see as a priority, just at least an analysis to look at any opportunities for investment in areas that can have long-term payback for the district, so that this is actually paying. This element could have big climate benefits, but could pay for itself over a period of time. And even a 10-year period of paying for itself would, I think, be a great win for the district and for this item.
I'll echo that. I think we have a short list here of some good things to do, kind of fall into the category of, these are nice things. Sometimes we can get confused, or we can say, oh, well, we're doing something good, and forget that we still need to be effective. Yeah, and so I think that's what you're saying, Steve, is these are good long-term investments. But let's make sure that we're accounting for that long-term investment, that we're actually going to get some payoff, if you will. In the long term, we're going to say, wow, I'm glad we started that back in whatever year it is now.
And just to clarify, I don't know what the opportunities are exactly, but when we looked at the treatment plant, for example, we had extremely short paybacks for some investments, and some investments were a little bit longer payback. But I think anything within a 10-year and shorter window, and maybe in some cases even longer, because we're going to be around for a long time, right? Those investments can still make sense because they're not pulling from the pot of money that we're talking about to do all these great additional mandates. So I would prioritize anything that does have a short payback, but don't make that a set criteria that it absolutely has to have that in order to move forward.
And these projects, I would be looking at a 20 or 30-year payback window, really, honestly.
And I think that's a perfect, especially if there's recommendations for, if you're taking a look at the total life cycle cost analysis, taking a look at sort of a level up and looking at what those key performance indicators of how you prioritize projects. I think that's going to help staff make recommendations to that regular board around where those investments should go, because here's what it looks like. And,
I just want to make sure that we are accounting for the investment, not just doing it because it was on the list.
Sure.
So one of the enumerated responsibilities of this board is to be able to come up with a watershed plan. And I would be deeply disappointed if, as part of our budgeting process, that we didn't have the earliest stages of development of that in place in our budget. And this would also mean that as we look at this, it's an opportunity for us to look nationwide at the level of expertise that we could draw in, because this is going to be a marquee project, and any number of universities and consulting groups would want to have their name on it. So that would be a priority for me. The second is around equity. And in the first instance, equity is about saving lives. And one of the things that I would hope come out of the tabletop review that you did last month would be the requirement to develop an evacuation plan, particularly as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has already identified those areas within Penn 2 that have the greatest risk of loss of life. So in the equity element to it, outreach, notification, and what are you going to do if Penn 1 breaches and it comes across Denver Avenue with all the people down in Fox Run? So that would be the second element to it. So part one, climate change, let's get started early. Part two, recognize that our first priority has got to be saving lives.
Is there Seth? Or do you have Paul?
No, that was helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to also speak to the fact that one of the tasks of the board was to set the first year operating budget, and we're talking about the $500,000 within that first year operating budget. But I think that it might be worth talking as a board that that's not just all of the money that's going to be allocated for these new priorities. There was $1 million contingency built into that. There's a debt service payment to pay back the loan to Portland. There's some money put in for ongoing capital to give the future board flexibility after this initial phase of PMLS projects and capital projects came through, that the amount of time and resource by the district put towards these 3 new mandates would increase as those first immediate priorities came off, so that it's not just a $500,000 allocation that goes the first year. And it might be worth, we can't necessarily bind future boards, but I think the intention was at setting that level that there would be some transition in years 6 through 10 of staff and resource and funding towards those new priorities. And I don't know if we need to memorialize that or if we can just prioritize this and leave that for the new board to pick up and start from once they're elected and appointed.
Just to summarize that point, would it be to make a recommendation or objective that after a certain amount of time when the major capital stuff is done, then to transition into more funding of those or an increase?
I don't know what the mechanism might be, but even just having this discussion on the record that we didn't think that the new priorities only merited $500,000 of funding out of the operating, but there was room built in that could transition, and that the future board wouldn't be hemmed in or boxed by inadequate funding, but that funding could be prioritized and reallocated from where it is in year 1.
Thank you.
I think that's a great point. Would just echo, I think staff agrees with that assessment, that there is changes that can be made after we get through the transition that will give future boards opportunities to redirect a reasonably significant amount of resource.
Any other questions, comments? Eric?
Yeah, I just was going to follow on with what Seth was saying, and part of the way I had understood it earlier was this first 500,000 was essentially, down payment is not quite the right word, but it was essentially the start to set up programs, frameworks, what those programs might develop into and how they might ramp up and expand. I don't have the vision to see that far out, but I think the intent was this was to fund sort of starting up programs to support those new mandates going forward. What they'll evolve to, the future boards will have to evaluate what's working, what's not. But I'm supportive of what was said before, that it's not this is your allowance, that's all you get. Come back next year and you'll get another 50 cents.
And that's just to be clear, that obviously budgeting in the future is up to the future boards, and they'll have that full autonomy to do that. Mary Helen?
I agree with all that's been said, but especially because I've said it so many times about the equity part that Eric Molander mentioned. And he mentioned Fox Run, and it's a unique situation. Jim put something about it in his memo. It's actually, they lease their land from the owner of the land. So they own their homes, but they don't have individual property tax. So it doesn't show up on their property tax appraisal. So it's essential that we take care of them, because it's been identified as one of the lowest income housing projects in the city of Portland. And just across Gertz Road from them is Deltawood, which is a homeowners association that operates independently. And they are also designated as a low income, the lowest income homeowners association in the city of Portland. So we need to pay close attention. I'm not up on all the other lower incomes, but I think that whoever the consultants are that'll do this, we do need to pay attention to that, because they will be the first. There's a large Columbia River RV park that's right across Bridgeton Road at 13th, and those have always been referred to as floating like corks in the river if the water breaches the levee at that point. And I know that the PMLS is talking about changes to Bridgeton Road. So I just wanted to echo that. And I don't know if Bob Salinger's still on. I'll let him speak to that, but I think it's also imperative that we identify natural restoration efforts that we can do that would increase or decrease damages to the Penn 2 land, as well as repair some of the pumps that are not operating. And just this last week, there was flooding in the parking lot of PIR because the pump was not operating and they had to do something. I don't know. And Bill would probably know more about that issue. But I think we need to look at those things that are already causing us problems or could cause us really bad problems and identify those as imperative to take care of. If we've already got a problem and then we choose more issues, I think we're not doing as good as we could.
Thank you, Mary Helen. And just to clarify, we also have the money with the GEO bond for environmental projects that's outside of what we're talking about right now. Go ahead, Tanny.
I would agree with what's been said. The 500,000 is kind of like, I look at it almost like a placeholder. And as these programs and things get put into place, you're going to figure out exactly what you need. I also think, though, that we should not be designating unspent funds. It should go into reserves so that the board can determine how they want to fund the programs rather than having that determined for them.
Yes, that's a great point, Tanny, and that really is the elected and appointed board does have to make all those basically financial decisions on how they want to approach that. So appreciate that, yeah, the role and timing of that.
Questions, comments? This has been good discussion so far. Nancy?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Corky, you said something about this list of projects. And
About what?
I think I heard you say something about this list of projects. And I'm like, wait, what list?
Not a list of projects, sorry. Yeah, this list of priorities that are now included in our workload. It has
Okay.
Mandates.
Yeah, the additional mandates. I misspoke, sorry.
Thank you. And then, yes, I'm just gonna second or third or fourth the idea of, like, I think the watershed plan, which I think is starting in July 1. Yes, okay, because that's part of our legislation and it's part of guiding where some of this work goes. And since you're writing things down, Colin, I'm also going to put, in terms of the cultural history, and paying attention to our the culture of our indigenous people who lived here in this floodplain. As part of, that would be part, I know there's a lot of, we have lots of great recent cultural history that we should highlight, and also the older history as well. So with, this conversation is probably going to continue,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so as we have thoughts or ideas, we can send them to the chair, and then in future, staff will be making recommendations too that we will take action on as a board in future meetings.
This is sort of a prelude to the proposed budget. And the forecast identified the 500,000, and there was an awful lot of conversation during the forecast discussion about how we got there. In rereading the statute and preparing the budget, we recognize that the next board has the statutory authority to really dig into the details, but we also want you to approve some funding for that board to work with. So this was, remember Lori said, the budget's going to be tight, so we're going to be coming to you at your meetings leading up, because we have to wait till after the session. So this is one of those items where we're trying to seek guidance, both within the statute, but also give you influence with the next board.
Right, and really the FY25 budget, because we're going to be in charge for half of that year.
You're in charge of the whole year. You're going to adopt the entire year budget.
Well, true. Okay, all right, thanks for pulling those pieces together, that connection with the budget.
Thanks, Nancy. Rochelle?
Thanks. For those of us who are newer board members, would it be, I'm interested in looking back at the appropriate old board packet to see what this board adopted as, or what the vision was when the forecasted budget was adopted about how the $500,000 would be used, just so I don't rehash that. And some of the questions in my mind, it sounds like there was interest in having the year one funding be for setting up new future programs. And so I'd just like to get a better sense, in addition to the restoration
plan for the environmental pieces, what was envisioned. And I guess a related question in my mind and thinking about the PMLS project and the potential that the Army Corps may not meet, 100% of the local environmental regulations and how to close the gap. I know that there's some money in the GEO bond package that could be used to help close the gap, but I'm realizing I'm unclear about kind of how much of a gray area there is between operational dollars and capital for helping close that gap. So I guess that's more of a Lori question, but I guess that's two parts. And I can follow up on that latter piece separate because that's maybe just something I need to get up to speed on.
Rochelle, I think it might take, I'm going to need to go back and look through some of the notes and minutes and so on to refresh my memory, but would it be acceptable to the board and to you if we scheduled a follow-up conversation to walk through those things with you?
Yeah, that's great.
We'll get that done.
Thanks, Rochelle. Those are really good questions. I don't recall a lot of specificity when we were discussing some of these, so you might be a little disappointed when we come back with some of the notes, but I think there's obviously opportunity for further discussion and direction going forward.
Specifics are forthcoming.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. It's a chicken and egg kind of thing too. When you haven't done the watershed plan, you haven't done some of the elements needed for that, a little bit more specificity on costs, but yeah. Any other questions, discussion? This has been, I think, productive.
Yes, Chair, I've got a topic I'd like to bring up that's very much along these lines. Okay. So we're really into uncharted territory here. And we've done this before in a way with Levy Ready Columbia. Some folks remember that. And we did that. We were basically, these are a lot of new topics, just like today. This topic is, we're trying to figure out how to handle it. It's something we've never dealt with before. And so I would love to put it out there for a discussion at this point of whether it makes sense to do what we did during Levy Ready Columbia. We went to Oregon Solutions and said, folks, can you help facilitate board management of this? And that seemed to work very, very well for us. I'm thinking that might be a good idea for us to do for the coming year, and only for 1 year. So as we go through the May vote and into the budget season, and we start to transition toward a new board, up until the new board is seated, then that facilitator goes away. But in the meantime, it seems like we've got so many balls in the air and so many things constantly changing. Sequencing is changing, timelines are changing. Understandably, it might make sense for us to bring in a facilitator. What I want to be really clear about is, in my suggestion here, and again, I'm just putting it out there for conversation, but one, I don't mean this in any way as integrating staff. You guys have been doing fantastic. In fact, this whole bond measure discussion starting in early December, boy, you guys just rolled with that. And, we through a few curveballs got thrown at us, and you guys did a fantastic job of that. Thank you. I'm talking about enhancing what staff is doing and helping, aiding them with what they're doing. I also am really, I don't really like facilitators in general very much. Good ones I love. There's a lot of bad ones out there too, that I'm not so happy with. I don't like spending the money on it just to hire a facilitator, thinking that's going to solve our problems. No, I don't like that. But in this case, I think it might make a lot of sense. So I toss it out there. What do you guys think?
Thanks, Corky. I see Mary Helen's hand up.
I was looking for the clap your hands, thumbs in the air.
That's the raise hand. But...
Yeah, no, well, I know, but then you called on me before I found it. But,
okay.
As always, Corky's far more eloquent in his explanation of wanting a facilitator, and I totally agree with every word he said. The Levy Ready Columbia would not have been as successful without the intervention of Oregon Solutions. And for those of you that weren't familiar with their work, they have it on their website. You have to submit an application. I don't think it would be a problem in our case, but I think it would greatly enhance and support the great work that the staff has done and assist the board in being able to understand all the various juggling issues because they have a familiarity with our project. So yay, Corky, thank you. You're in the room. I'd run over and give you a big hug if I could and if I were there.
That would be a clear endorsement of his.
Yeah, but her knees aren't doing so well.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Mary Helen. Discussion. I'm going to say I'm not in favor, I'm not strongly opposed or in favor. I'm just throwing out, obviously you brought up cost. When we did the Levy Ready Columbia process, we were obviously in a different place, right? We were talking about a big problem at a high level. So I definitely saw the value in that facilitation. We now have a board and we've gotten some things, big things accomplished. We've got the GEO bond ready to go out. We have the at the legislature, the tool for the rest of the operating revenue. So I'm just kind of, I want to make sure that the benefit of having a facilitator with the work that we have from now until the end is worth it. And I haven't really thought that through very well.
No, and that's what I want to hear from folks too, is that, I have the same question, is it worth it? I don't even know what the cost is.
Yeah.
But then the other thing to keep in mind is we're going to get some more curveballs in the coming year. And so I want to make sure that we've got a good structure set up between staff, board, and perhaps, an additional facilitator to handle those surprises. We know they're coming. We just don't know what they are or when they're coming.
Discussion? Seth?
I like, firstly, I like your idea of doing that. I kind of share Steve's hesitancy of, I don't know if this board is the right place to do that. And I'm thinking also that how can we set up the future board for success? My contribution, because I'm not an expert in any of these three areas, would be to reach out and solicit people in my community who are and might be interested in participating in a public process new board undertakes to kind of help determine what the community's needs are. Because my thought is that might be a more prudent use of resources is to, other than to collect our collective ones. If there's anyone who's particularly interested in those three areas and wants to continue on in an advisory role or appointed role with the district in those areas, or the current board that we have reaching out to find people who might have some stakeholders in cultural history, equity, and climate activism, what might be a better use of our time and also the resources for a facilitator. Just throw that out there.
Thanks, Seth. Eric?
I guess my comments are not probably as well formed as Corky's in terms of, but I guess I'm struggling with, I'm reluctant to introduce another voice. I mean, it's already a very large group of stakeholders and, it's by necessity, but it's kind of been an unwieldy process to get to where we are. And I guess I look at it and I feel like for the initial board's duties, we're getting close to being done with making the serious decisions. As you mentioned, the legislation, there's proposals before the legislature to deal with the operating revenue. We're about to get the bond to go out. Then we're going to be dealing with dissolution and then the election of the permanent board. I'm struggling with what is it that we're going to be needing to have somebody facilitate. And so I'm somewhat reluctant to kind of go down that path, but.
And if you don't mind, to be clear, I'm thinking of it as like what we did with LRC. It would not be an additional voice. It'd be somebody that's working closely with staff, in a very tight collaboration, but assisting as we go forward. So that as what new is going to pop up? I don't know. But look where we are right now. We've already deviated from our original timeline regarding when districts are going to merge. When the districts are merging at this point, but this board is continuing, which was not the original timeline. So, there's one example right there. How do we manage that? And having another facilitator just help, really focus on some of those questions that are popping up as we move through this next year. The sequencing, we've had legal questions pop up. I think there's going to be more. If not, it would be a waste of money. You're right. I think we're going to have a few questions.
Thoughts?
Corky, you mentioned all the balls in the air, and you were getting into it there a little bit, but perhaps you need to enumerate what they are, because to me, the timeline for dissolving existing boards and this one continuing is going to be established in the legislation. It's not really going to something we're going to have to decide. I mean, other than the mechanics of it, and I just can't. I don't know. I guess if the other balls, the environmental and cultural and equity thing, I guess I'm concerned that it's the new board that needs to go forward with that. So
yeah, no, I agree. I was looking more at between now until the new board gets here. As I mentioned, just the merging of the districts, that one alone right there is a little tricky. Originally, the districts were supposed to merge essentially at the same time that the new permanent board is put into place. That's now changed, and honestly, I don't even know exactly how that's going to play out myself.
Right, but I'm thinking a facilitator isn't going to answer that. It's lawyers, people like that are going to answer those questions and tell us what needs to be done.
I think a good facilitator will help us chart out that path really well. Provide us some clarity that in this very murky year. And that's why I tossed it out there for discussion. If, I could be wrong. Maybe this is all set into place and we don't have any big decisions coming up in the coming year and everything is clear. If that's how everybody feels, or most folks feel, then yeah, let's drop this. Don't worry.
I saw Tanny, I think. Did you have your hand up? And then Mary Helen.
I would agree with what's being said. I mean, you can get a good facilitator and you can get a bad facilitator, and sometimes you end up in a ditch, but it's kind of like, I feel like right now we're running around the dog track and the facilitator would need to be a dog catcher or something. So I guess
that's to me, just cat catcher.
Hang on, we're going so. So it's kind of like, I guess I would kind of like to know or have a pretty good idea what this person's going to do, what our needs are, and how this is all going to fit together. What if a group of us maybe got together and tried to work something up just to figure out how this would all work, rather than just getting a facilitator and saying, go get them.
I agree. Yeah.
Make sure there's something that we need and it's going to be a benefit to us, and we're not just, funding a consultant's welfare program or something.
Thanks, Tanny. We'll go Mary Helen and then Nancy.
Part of my main job for 22 years was setting up business continuity plans for AAA. But my entire life, most people have called me a Pollyanna. So I always think everything's going to turn out like it is. And then when it doesn't, I'm kind of stuck in my tracks. And I've had that conversation with Steve Greenwood, who did the Levy Ready Columbia for most of its life. And he wrote the book about good collaboration, how to do that. And so I think that, yes, there's probably not a person amongst this board that couldn't lead a meeting, that couldn't guide us. But I think, as Tanny said, maybe a small group could sit down with Steve Greenwood or Sarah O'Brien, who have done similar kinds of things before, and say, this is where we are familiar with our work, and I would trust that they would be able to have done many the Oregon Solutions. They've done many environmental kinds of things, but I think we need to, and no one wants the bond measure and everything to go as smoothly as possible, but we also have to kind of keep in the back of our mind. So when Tanny referred to them being a dog catcher, we just have to know how to run faster than the dog catcher's net. So I think that we could get that assistance, or at least the advice that we needed, and help expedite our work and help us find a way to set up a business continuity plan. What if the legislature doesn't vote on this session? What if the bond measure fails? What if U.S. Army Corps of Engineers doesn't get the funding that they need at the federal budget level? All of those things are not certain. And until they're certain, I don't think that we can safely say everything's going to happen like we want, even though we all want them to have a happy ending. I don't think anybody does it. And so I would strongly support at least Tanny's suggestion to sit down and speak with, and I would be very targeted. And I don't know what Corky thinks about this, but Steve Greenwood would be, in my mind, the epitome of being able to give us advice. He'd have no problem saying, we aren't going to be of any help. Go forth and prosper. You're doing great on your own.
Thanks, Mary Helen. Let's go to Nancy.
I want to recognize the chaos we've all been living under the last year, longer, probably. I'm not going to put bounds on it, but I feel like after March 13th, there's going to be a bit, the legislation's either going to pass or not, right? And then I will feel a lot more like the path is a lot clearer in this role. To your point, Mary Helen, like if the legislation doesn't pass, like I don't even want to think about that right now. I know we all need to have, there are contingency plans. I guess we just continue what we're doing for another year, but I'm really hoping that it passes. And I guess I'm agnostic about having a facilitator. If you have a good one, they're great. If you have a crappy one, you just let's just cut the cord. But it is hopefully, a 9-month process. There are certain things to go through. But we also don't even know, how much would it cost to have a facilitator? How much do you have to go out for a competitive process? What does that do to the staff capacity? Who manages the contract? All that kind of stuff. It's not free to have a facilitator, but you want to make sure you're getting a value, right? Exactly. So some of the things I heard were contingency plans and lining things up, which I feel like is content, which is what the staff does, and any board members who want to be involved. And then for me, a facilitator, especially in a place where you have lots of different voices, can help frame things during the conversation. So I'm wondering, I'm kind of thinking, is it this board? Is it the next board who needs a facilitator? And I have no idea even how much it costs or what the impact is on the staff who are still managing 700, 800, 900 boards. It seems like way too many. So
all that will depend on scope, right?
What's that?
All of that would depend on scope.
Right. So that's my contribution, which was a lot of words, but saying what are we hoping to gain? What is the scope and what does it cost? So we can figure out if this is the right time.
And I would suggest maybe we, like Tanny said, put a small group together to start to define some of that, with the idea being that we're not going to even get back to this discussion until after we know whether the state legislation is passed or not. Right? So, but why not have that conversation right now, assuming the state legislation is going to pass, and then we can discuss a little bit further.
So is that just a process question? If this board wanted to designate a subcommittee to meet a few times to flesh out what those remaining, how would I characterize them? Kind of the remaining business of the board the remaining sticky wickets, the remaining issues that could use any type of facilitation help to then bring back to the board after the May, after the legislative process through the short session is finished. Is that what you're proposing?
I think so, yeah.
Rochelle, go ahead.
Thanks. I guess a question for staff to help me think through this. In addition to the question whether the legislation passes, there's the question whether the bond measure passes, and I'm curious if staff feel like if the bond measure didn't pass, whether that will create a lot more work and difficult conversations with the board, or you have, I feel like I've heard snippets of what the plan B is, and that would be probably a lot. My sense is that would be a lot of work for staff to get plan B in place, but it wouldn't be contentious questions for the board. It would be a matter of lining up other forms of support that would probably be welcomed by the board. So just curious if you can weigh in. It seems like the May vote is a big unknown, but in a few months that we'll know how that goes.
I can take a leap at it. I think if the legislation doesn't pass, it's one set of work for this board. If the bond doesn't pass, it's another set of work. The two are related, and you all will have to make decisions about dissolution in any of those scenarios. I think the fallback plan, should the bond not pass, is probably a direct appeal to the state of Oregon and the legislature during the 25 session, and some hard, serious evaluation of the vote results, and try and identify, maybe with some additional research, a revised measure that we would need to go back out with at a future date, depending on our success with the state and what the research on the election showed. So those are your plan Bs. If the legislation doesn't pass, the legacy boards will definitely need to remain in place for at least through the 2025 legislative session, because the urban district won't have adequate operating revenues. So plan B for operations is status quo of the legacy districts and tapping the $1.2 million City of Portland line of credit to continue to work the 25 session on our operating revenues, and whatever this board would direct around identifying capital money if the bond fails or not. And we can write that down for you or go into more details, but there aren't really a lot of pathways for us to go. And I think a facilitator scope might be useful in the event that the legislation doesn't pass, certainly. That would be a different scope.
Well, if I were in your shoes, I would prefer a good facilitator managing that conversation.
Again, it's really up to you all. We want to support you and make sure you have a good experience and that you get your voices heard and so on. So we're agnostic. I think if I were to go and try and hire someone today, I don't know what I would hire them for or who I would hire. So I do need some additional direction from you all to determine what exactly it is you're looking for. But we're happy to support you if you decide that you want to go down that path. Again, depending on scope, we have some existing contracts we could probably deploy, or subs we could hire, or again, if it's a big scope or you don't like any of those folks and you choose to do it, we'd have to go through some sort of a procurement. But I wouldn't let that bother you. Like, we can do the procurements, we're available to do that. We appreciate your sensitivity to our workload, but supporting you guys is important. So we would certainly follow your direction.
Real quick, Seth, and then I'll go to you. Just thinking this through, because out loud, but it seems like one path is what we described, subgroup of the board to get together and talk about what these remaining kind of business items are. And as Jim kind of alluded to, there's different items depending on the results of these two major things we've got going on. Or I think we could ask staff to kind of summarize those items from here on out till the end of our time as a board, and what those elements are, and that might be more efficient. And then at least it would enable us to think about collectively, well, that one is going to be quite a discussion and could use facilitation, or we look at the list and say there's not enough here. So I'm with Jim. If I was tasked right now to go to a consultant and describe a need of this board and what they would be doing for us for the next 9 months, I would have a hard time iterating that, and that's a nightmare for me. Like, I will not hire an external consultant to do something unless the scope is very, very clear. And the deliverables are very, very clear, and the cost is very, very clear. And right now, I'd have a tough time doing that. But I think those are probably two paths.
So if you'd like, we can come to your next meeting with a reiteration of the timeframe and the decisions. We presented that to you at one point in the past. I can't remember when.
Early December meeting also, and I think October.
And we've also done a pretty deep dive on all of the tasks necessary to complete the transition and for this organization to have employees and so on. So we've got a fairly detailed workflow and assignments made, so we can summarize that for you too. But we've got a pretty good handle on all the tasks that need to be completed before July 1st. And we'd be happy to reiterate that with this board or with the subcommittee of the board if you choose.
That'd be a place to start and then go potentially where, go ahead, Seth.
And that needs to be shared with the legacy boards as well.
Okay, happy to do that.
So given the timelines and what we're talking about, what I've heard, it seems like at some point at a board meeting after the end of the short session, if staff could bring back a list or sample for the board to take a look at.
Rendition of the wickets.
Rendition, a timeline of the tactical things that need to happen, as well as some of the things that are still outlying for the board to consider. And then at a board meeting after the bond vote will be the time to actually formalize the scope of, because at that point we would know whether or not we're ending and what time frame that would be and what we would still need would be on our plate to get done before January and move forward at that point. That gives staff direction on what to do. And then depending on how that first meeting goes, a smaller portion of the board might help formalize that so that the whole board can look at it after the May vote. Does that sound like?
I think so. And as just a few people have pointed out, when we do all that, we may say,
yeah,
it's all clear. Yeah.
That sounds very doable. I appreciate that clarity. So we'll bring back to you after the legislative session the list of decisions. We'll try and get it to you ahead of time before that, because it mostly exists, so we can share it now and then we can reiterate it after. One of the ones that keeps me up at night is if the bond passes and the legislation doesn't. That feels super complicated to me, but we'll figure it out.
The bond passes, the only thing you have to worry about is putting together a scope for a consultant.
Yeah, then we're the dog that caught the car, back to our dog metaphor.
Thank you, Corky, for bringing this up. This has been a good discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
I feel general concurrence in the direction that we've kind of come up with. If you feel strongly that we're heading the wrong way, raise your hand right now and speak your mind. But,
or if there's a particular topic or area of pinch or pain or something that you want some help with, let me know, and we can try and identify one of our existing stable of good people who can come in and probe it, clean it up, and shine some light on it and get her fixed. So.
Excellent.
Just to clarify, did all of what Seth just said constitute a business continuity plan? It sounded like that to me, because that's, I think, important of, like you said, the dog that caught the car. And maybe if we know what to happen when we catch the car, we wouldn't have to take as much time to plan how we're going to get to the vet with no human to take us. I mean, sorry to keep using that.
Have to write that
I think
down.
the short answer is
an analogy, but it's kind of good. I mean,
it was good, Mary Helen. Yes, I think the short answer is yes. But
okay.
I think we are going to wrap this meeting up early today, if possible. Wendy?
Just want to remind everyone that we have given you some free time back. So the March work session on March 6th is canceled. So then we would be seeing you again on March 21st. And that will be at the City of Portland.
Oh, excellent.
I will be adding detailed directions in the meeting invitation.
Wendy? Go ahead, Eric.
I had a quick clarification question for materials in the packet going back, not on the most recent discussion, just in terms of the language that it's almost approved by the Secretary of State. We're only talking about this pages 32, 33 through 35, right? Right here in the middle. This one in the back is not
correct.
is not yet approved or is not intended to be.
Different document.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear about what's safe and what's maybe a little radioactive.
We think those words are safe. They do not have safe harbor because we don't have a formal opinion from the Secretary of State because they need to see it in its absolute final state. So there's a graphic designer finishing that up. We're waiting to get a ballot number because what we give them is all we can use. Even if we find a typo, we can't.
We live with the typo.
Live with the typo.
Gotcha.
Along those lines, Jim, I just sent you.
Dog analogy.
Okay.
Sorry. I just sent you those, a message, but on page 33, since I brought it up, under specific projects include in bullet number 2, it says the segment of the 1948 levee. Are we now referring to the railroad embankment as a levee?
It never was a levy.
Well,
No,
that's
not for general communications. I think it's used in that case for people to understand generally what we're talking about, but I agree that it's not precise from a
I
levy.
can't understand what she's.
It's just a communication tactic. It's not intended to define the specific definition of a levy, but it's to help people understand the nature of the facility and that we're going to have to build a new one, I think. Is that essentially what you said, Carrie? It's not for general communication purpose.
Okay, so that's not part of the explanation of it because Burlington Northern has a new chief operating officer who has indicated interest, and I think I sent, I don't know, a couple months ago, but my whole year's been screwy. Colin and I exchanged with Warren Buffett way back a couple of years ago, and that all kind of went sideways with them, and then he retired, and now there's a woman, I forget her name, Melissa something another. So that might be an opportunity for funding, and we can talk about that later. But if we call it a levy, then we can't go to them and say, help us fix a levy that is not a levy to them.
Thank you, Mary Helen.
Okay, if I don't get any, what's that?
Second.
Nice afternoon.
I'm gonna call it. We are officially adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.